this is going to be kind of interesting because we don't usually do public talks about this, because today we're focusing on plant eradication. And all of the invasive species committees across the islands do plant eradication, but it's kind of in the background because we're working on plants that most people won't encounter, and that's the hope of it. We are part of the University of Hawaii, and that is through MNOA, the Natural Resources Department, Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit. It's a very, very long title. But we do have a steering committee here on island. So even though sort of our operations is on all in Honolulu, we really go to the experts that have a lot of years of experience and knowledge working here on Hawai'i Island. So we have folks from federal agencies, from state agencies, from the University of Hawaii at Hilo, from local nonprofits, just as many brains as we can get in a room. We try to meet quarterly and go over the work that we're doing and really do a lot of stealing of the mind power from these great folks. And that's all voluntary, that they contribute their time. So we really appreciate that steering committee. As our name implies, we work on invasive species. And I always like to start with the definition, because I think this is really important. We run into sometimes people saying things like, well, invasive species it's an arbitrary designation. It's, one person likes it, another person doesn't. And, well, if you don't like it, then you call it invasive. And that is not true, because invasive species has a definition, and that definition was put into the law in 1999. And we consider that really important when we go back to think about, is something invasive, and is it something that needs to be worked on? There's two parts to that definition. The first part being non-native. Something has to be not native to an area in order to be considered invasive. And a lot of people get hung up thinking that's the whole definition, but it can't be the whole definition, because there's a lot of things we have here that are non-native that are really important to us, like pretty much all of our food crops, not native, but we still value them very highly because we need them to survive. What we do call invasive species are the pests and diseases that attack those things that provide food and nutrition for us. So that second part is harm. That first part of the definition, not native, that's just one half. You have to meet the second part of the definition, which is it has to cause harm. And in the federal law, that harm is defined in one of three areas: to the environment, to the economy, or to human health. And in 2000, when Hawaii adopted a similar definition, they actually added a fourth category, which is way of life. And that's to reflect that there are unique cultural and lifestyle aspects in Hawaii that could be affected by invasive species. And I'm sure if you live on Hawai'i Island, you have been negatively impacted by an invasive species, probably a little tiny one, I'm going to guess. But we do have a lot of examples of that here on the Big Island. So rapid ohia death, which is a fungal disease attacking our keystone native tree, the ohia, that is considered a direct negative impact to the environment, right? Then you have something like little fire ant, which actually is a triple threat. It hits all three areas, all four actually with the state definition, but it is a huge economic pest because it does impact our farmers, and having to deal with little fire ants from everything, from prevention, so that you don't have your workers going in refusing to pick coffee or something because they're getting showered down of little fire ants. The cost that you have to have if you have fire ants to treat them, and you have to maintain that cost regularly, it never goes away. So that's something that is a huge economic impact. And then we have something like the semi-slug. Lots of animals that are invasive species are considered that because they carry diseases that can impact human health, like mosquitoes. And what we see with the semi-slug, it is the most effective vector for rat lungworm disease, making Hawai'i Island the hotspot for severity of rat lungworm disease in the entire world, because we have this meeting of two invasive species, the parasite Angiostrongylus cantonensis that causes rat lungworm disease, and then this vector, the semi-slug, that's really good at delivering it to humans and giving us the disease. So all of these things fall under this really broad umbrella of invasive species. No matter whether it's a plant, an animal, a disease, sort of this idea of thinking about this continuum of invasive species can be applied across the board, that where you have time on your x-axis and then money on your y-axis, and money can be resources and staff and expertise and time and all of it. Prevention is your cheapest. So trying to keep something from getting in, whether it's your backyard or it's the island or the state or the country, right? Whatever scale you're talking about, keeping something out and doing the measures you can take to prevent things from coming in is always going to be your best bet. So you'll see this, you know, on an island level, as individuals, we don't have a whole lot of role here. If you know someone who has a snake, you can tell them, like, please turn that snake in under the amnesty program. You can, you know, tell your auntie in Kansas, do not send me seeds of random wildflowers, right? There are things you can do on the prevention scale, but most of this is handled by our agencies, either USDA or HDOA, to prevent things from coming in. So you'll see the headlines around Christmas time when, you know, they package up, they open a container of Christmas trees and they find wasps or slugs or something in there, and then they just slam the doors and they send it back to Oregon, right? That's prevention. That is not always effective because we do keep getting more and more invasive species each year. Things do slip by because our biosecurity isn't necessarily 100%. So the next best thing is to find it early, what we call early detection, and eradicate it, get rid of it. If you find it early enough, you can do that. Unfortunately, with a lot of timescales, depending on what the species is that you're talking about, if it's something like an insect where it can kind of sneak by for a while, and then by the time you notice it, it's too late already. You have a very short time scale with certain things. Plants, you have more decades in there for that time scale. So this can vary. The amount of time on that x-axis can really vary, but they all follow the same path. Unfortunately, what often ends up happening, you can see in that orange block, public awareness typically begins well past the point where you can eradicate something. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes we just don't see something, or it's new, or we don't have the technology available to fight it, you know, in time. There's a lot of things that could go into it. And a lot of times it comes down to funding. It's very hard to get attention on something that you're saying is, as we know with global warming, it's very hard to get attention on something that you're saying is going to be an impact in 30 years, right? It's sort of like, well, that doesn't seem like an urgent crisis moment until 30 years later down the road, and then it's too late. So that can often be something that by the time people are yelling about something and saying, hey, this is a huge problem, we are well past that point. And now we're headed towards the big red block, which is the point of no return. That's when a species is so widespread that there is no really feasible way that that is going to be removed from the island. And so within that red block, there are lots of strategies for mitigation, reducing the threat, reducing the impact, reducing the harm, but those are ongoing, and they will require ongoing effort on the part of a lot of folks. So we generally have not, you know, that doesn't fall in one entity's lap. Once you get into management, you think about something like little fire ants that are in that point of no return on the Big Island. That's in people's backyards, it's in farms, it's in ranches, it's in businesses, it's in parks, it's in beaches, it's everywhere, right? It's no one entity's responsibility. So everyone's dividing up the effort here. And we felt that it was still really important to do some work in that area, even though we are not able to solve that problem and we're not able to eradicate. There are resources that can be provided. And so we work really hard to get those research generated strategies and get those out to folks in a way that they can implement and use that. We have our fire ant program where we teach communities how to effectively use the correct pesticides to treat for fire ants. We also have our albizia program where we do the same, but with albizia, we'll even work with large entities like the Department of Transportation or the county or the electric company to identify really scary areas where those albizia have to come down, and then we'll work to get the funding to take those down. So we will do a lot of work in that big red block of mitigation in the point of no return, just because it's still, it doesn't mean we should give up. It doesn't mean we say, oh, well, it's too far gone, let's walk away. We really still have to continue to do the work because it does severely impact people's lives. So that's where our programs are that are the most front-facing that people will often encounter BIISC is through those programs. However, our historically, our role was set up to work on plant eradications. There are no other entities across the islands that are responsible for eradicating new invasive plants that are coming in. That is unique to the ISCs. So we kind of work in that early detection, looking for new plants that are coming in so that we are trying to get them early and then getting rid of them, or if we're too far gone to get rid of them, because we do a lot of assessment to figure out where we are, at least trying to do some kind of mitigation to contain or exclude them in different areas. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, because we do a lot of talk about albizia and fire ants and rat lungworm and all these other kind of big high profile things that we work on. But this is kind of our secret core work that we don't talk about a lot. So targets in Puna, we have 3 plants that are present in Puna that are targeted for eradication. And then we have 1 that we're working on containing. So I'm going to talk about each of these individually. Overall, BIISC has 9 target species that are out there that across the island that we're working to eradicate. We do have at least 1 eradication project in every district on the island. And you can go to our website, he's going to put that in the chat. You can go to our website to learn more about each of these plants. Today, I'm only going to, oh, I forgot about this. One thing that's important, and if you look at these plants, most of these pictures, they look really pretty. Maybe not Pereschia, which just looks terrifying, but they kind of look nice, right? And again, going back to that definition of invasive species, we will definitely get people who will say, well, that can't be invasive because it's so pretty, or that plant can be invasive because it's medicinal, or it's got purpose, it's got a use. It's important to note that that definition that I shared in the beginning, non-native causes harm. There's nothing in there about usefulness or prettiness or any of that, because most of the plants, particularly the plants that we have moved around the world, we've moved them because we thought they were pretty. We thought they were useful. We had some reason to do it. Humans like to move the stuff we like, right? 90% of our invasive plants here in Hawaii were introduced via the horticultural trade. Someone brought them in on purpose. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't cause harm. Just because a plant is pretty doesn't mean it can't be very harmful to the environment, right? Just because a plant is good looking doesn't mean it can't be an awful thing in the forest when you're trying to hike or get through it. It can displace habitat for native birds, all kinds of harms that it can cause. So we don't consider that part of the definition. Even if it's pretty, if it's causing harm, it's still gonna have to go. But yeah, so you can look up each of those individually to find out more of them. But I'm going to just talk about these 3 today because those are present in Puna, and this is really geared towards Puna. Applies a lot to the east side. So the first one I'm going to talk about is one of our longest running eradication targets, which is Cotoneaster pennonensis. And this one is, it was brought in the beginning of the last century because it's pretty. It's a really pretty plant. There we go. But it's also very monotypic, meaning it's going to take over an area and it's going to form these dense mats that are impassable. So that's not great. It has those beautiful red berries. Well, we like the look of red berries, but there are some creatures on this island that love to eat those red berries. So why do plants make berries? To transport their seeds. So you see this plant spreading well out from where it was first planted. And it's a pasture invader. So it can have economic impacts when it starts to take over pasture and reduce the amount of area that's there for cattle to utilize. And you can see those yellow blobs on our map where we have that in Upper Puna. And you can also see, if you look at the shaded areas, there's yellow blobs. This thing is in many areas on the island, not just Puna. It's in a lot of different places, but this is one that we have been working on since 2012. And we didn't find it necessarily in 2012. It's more something that had been noticed. And, we go through the work of evaluating the plant before we decide to eradicate it. And I want to, again, point back to last month's webinar done by Molly Murphy, where she really goes into the tool that we use to evaluate these plants, the Hawaii Pacific Weed Risk Assessment, and how those plants that tool will rate plants based on this very in-depth botanical background check. So we do that, then we have to look at how invasive is the plant acting in Hawaii? We're trying to monitor it, keep an eye on it. If we are looking at it and we're saying, nope, this looks like it's getting bad, then that becomes an eradication target if it's feasible. So you can see that monotypic stand there that Giselle's working in front of, where that's impassable. So when you start to get something like that in your forest, that's really gonna decrease the use of it, and it's not providing any kind of habitat for our native species. So we worked on that in 2012, and you can see, we have this big spike, which is generally when we find a new population that we didn't know about, all of a sudden, there's a bunch of new mature plants that need to be counted. But as we go through the years, we're getting closer and closer to zero. This one, we believe we're the closest to eradicating out of all of our target species, or I think there's one other one that we're really close on. And we hope in the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to declare this eradicated. Even after we've gotten rid of the last adult plant, it's not over. We don't just walk away and say, hey, we got them all. We have to go back regularly and check for keiki plants that are coming up. And we really need to know what that plant's seed bank viability is. How long are the seeds still going to be good in the soil? Because that's how long we need to keep monitoring. So these are things that even after we've gotten rid of the last known plant, there are still years to go before we're genuinely into eradication. But we do think that this one's very close. So we're excited about that. And again, this is probably not something you see very much, and that's intentional. We hope that you won't see this one and you won't encounter it in the forest. Then I'm going to go to one of our newest ones. So I talked about one of our longest running ones. This one was just found in 2021. That was the first year that we found this one on the Big Island. This was a high profile weed. It's well known. Chromalina odorata is actually one of the 100 worst invasive weed or plant or species, the 100 worst invasive species. That's plants, animals, everything thrown in together, fish, all of it. In the world. And so everywhere that this plant turns up is just a real problem for the areas when it's not native. This one was already on the radar in Hawaii because it had been found in Oahu in 2011. And we know that one of the ways that it got to the Big Island was through motocross, because it's very prolific at the Kahuku motocross track over on Oahu, and then it turned up at the motocross track in Hilo. And we kind of knew that was something that might happen. The seeds on this plant are really tiny and they're very sticky, and so those seeds can stick to a shoelace, to a hat, to some gloves. I mean, it's very easy to move this plant around, and unfortunately that is something that we kind of knew might happen, and we did end up finding it. But this is one that we've been going really hard on our public outreach on, because it is a noxious weed for the state, which means it's one of the very few plants that the state regulates based on the list that they put together in 1992. But this is something that has a lot of potential harm. It creates very dense thickets, so very similar to most of the plants that we're working on eradicating have that very same characteristic, where they form these really dense thickets that are impassable and they don't let anything else grow. But this one has all kinds of secondary metabolites, these chemicals that the plant produces that are really nasty. It can be very allergenic for some folks if they get it on their hands or breathe it in closely. It is toxic for cattle. So this is a pasture invader. In some parts of the world, you've seen cattle actually starving to death because they cannot eat this plant at all. It's completely toxic to livestock. And it is a prolific seeder. So it's a bad plant. It can cause, because of these secondary metabolites, it's oily. It can actually be a fire fuel, even when it's not totally dry. When it is dry, it is a definite fire fuel, just not something we want on the Big Island to keep contributing. So this is something we're really concerned about. You can see that upper dot way up here, the Hilo, that's the motocross track, that's the original detection site. And since then we did a lot of public outreach, and what we found was that kudos to the Puna community, because we started finding it in lots of places in Puna. And unfortunately, one of the things that we found out that was interesting with this plant, we had somebody who reported that the plant had been gifted to him. And he had planted it in his backyard, and then he called us because he said, this thing's taking over, but someone told me it was Mexican dream herb. They gave it to me in a little pot. Mexican dream herb is a completely different species. It is not an alternative name for this plant, which is called devilweed. Very different. Dream herb, devilweed. And there are obviously reasons for that. But what we did with a little investigation, we found that this is being sold online. This plant is being sold as Mexican dream herb. That is not Mexican dream herb. It's Mexican dream herb is a completely, it even looks different. It's a different plant. And unfortunately, some of the online recommendations were, crumple it up and put it under your pillow, make it into a tea, all these kinds of things that you really don't want to do. So that I think of as a very buyer beware story. As we all know on the internet, you gotta be a little careful, but even with plants, you think plant buying will be a pretty safe area. Yeah, really make sure that your growers are reputable. Like, I would say what we've learned with plants is stay away from Etsy for plants. Don't go there. But this one is so bad that we went really hard again on that public outreach. You can see that QR code if you have your phone with you. You're more than welcome to just kind of grab an image of that, and that'll take you to our website where we are. We give a lot more information because there's a lot of lookalike weeds. I would say in the year that we did the outreach on this, we got over 100, maybe like close to 120 reports of various plants that people were like, could this be it? And something like 5 of those reports did turn out to be positive devilweed. And we will happily sift through 110 photos of not devilweed to find the one devilweed. So send us a picture. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, even our field crew leader, she put her phone number there. You can message us, you can email us. There's lots of ways to get in touch with us, and we will come and take care of this plant. That is the work that we provide. We will come and get rid of it for you. And that's true of all of the plants that I'm talking about today. Like, we will come and take care of this plant. We will do that for free. It is a free service. So if you see any of these plants, report it, and we're gonna come out there and take care of it, no cost to you. So the next one I want to talk about, this is going back up to Upper Puna in the volcano area. And this is a really interesting one. It's a honeysuckle, giant Burmese honeysuckle. And it's something that, like all honeysuckles, it's a vine, creates lots of vines, it climbs, gets up high so it can get to the sunlight. It's a favorite of birds. And this one's nasty. It resprouts after cutting. So that's another reason when you see one of these target eradication species, please contact us, because we know the proper way to completely get rid of the plant and kill it. And we need to have that recording of where that area is. Like we said, later on, we need to keep coming back and making sure there aren't keiki coming up. And we will keep that institutional memory, down the line, so that even if people move and, it's not the same people in the neighborhood and they don't remember, it's like, don't worry, we're going to have a database that tells us go out once a quarter or once a year or whatever it is and check on that. So it's really important that we get the information that these plants are out there so we can come and take care of it. This one, if you look on the right, the picture on the right, you see all that bright green, that is the honeysuckle up in the ohia. And we noticed that basically you can really see that the ohia next to it, everything's very dead and scraggly. This thing was just taking these trees out. And I want you to notice in the picture of the crew, that stem in the middle is a strawberry guava. That is not the stem of the Lonicera. What Kaya is holding right here, that is the stem of the vine of, when we say giant Burmese honeysuckle, it's not just the flower, it is the entire vine is absolutely massive. And all of these vines back in here are all part of it. And so each one has to be treated. So this one is just a real monster to deal with. And of course, when it's growing in native forests, you see the hapu'u, you see the ohia, you really want to avoid hurting anything else around it. So we have to be really precise with how we apply the herbicides to take care of this one. But we do think that this one is something we're going to be able to get rid of. And that's where we get into is, does it work? Are we able to successfully eradicate things? Because people see sort of the headline ones like little fire ants and think, oh, we can't eradicate anything. But we have eradicated many plants that people don't know about. We're really close on several. We have things like pampas grass, which was also present in Volcano, is also present in Puna, Jerusalem thorn, purple toad flax, princess tree. These are all things that were successfully eradicated by BIISC. We also, as I said, our bread and butter is plants, but we provide assistance for eradication efforts on other species when they come in. And one of the things we provided assistance on was axis deer, and we were the main field crew for axis deer, and we were able to help with the eradication of axis deer. So we do provide assistance on eradications for animals and other things, but yeah, so those are successful. I think we don't spend enough time talking about the fact that we do get rid of things happily, and they're not causing any further problems on the Big Island. So again, you know, that area that we're talking about is this early detection eradication. We want to push everything back into prevention, because with something like pampas grass, which is a serious invader in Maui, this is also a serious invader in California, in New Zealand, lots of places, and there's always a danger that it can be brought back in. You can buy pampas grass seeds online. Somebody well-meaning can bring this accidentally in. So just because something's gone doesn't mean it's gone forever. We've just pushed it back into the green block, and we still have to keep doing our early detection and our eradication. And sometimes things get beyond that, again, various reasons. When you get into this stage where it's past eradication, but maybe it's not so far gone, we have some different strategies, either to contain it in one area, or, you know, at certain times you try to exclude it from really high value areas, which it's like a farmer putting a fence around their farm to prevent pigs from coming in, right? That's exclusion. Or we're just trying to keep it to one place. Like the state is trying to keep little fire ants contained on the Big Island and not have them get to the point of return on all the other islands. And, you know, there's mixed results on that. But we do have some containment targets as well. So these are things that are too far gone for eradication, at least at the level at which we're funded, because all of our program is grant funded. And so they might be things like Myconia, where we're just trying to exclude it from certain places. It's pretty widespread in a lot of places, but we're trying to exclude it from places where it hasn't reached yet. Fountain grass, very widespread on the west side, but it hasn't come up into the natural area reserve in South Kona or the Volcano National Park, you know, that edge in South Kona. So we go out and we do work every year there to sort of prevent it from coming in. So there's some targets that we work on that are widespread in some areas, but not in others. And so we're trying to keep them out. Or they might be something like Phonax, which is in Kolokomauka in Kona, or European holly, which is up in Hakalau, and we're trying to keep them just contained in those areas and not spreading further. And the one I want to talk about for Puna is Moluccan raspberry. Another raspberry. If you've had any encounters with our rubus species that have invaded on Hawai'i Island, you will not be pleased to hear that there is another raspberry, but you might be pleased to hear we're trying to keep it contained. This is, as it implies, it's a raspberry, has thorns. There is one raspberry that does not have thorns. It's called a kala. It's a native Hawaiian plant. If you can be the person that figures out how to make a kala a commercially grown species that people can plant in their backyard, you can become a millionaire, I think, because no one's been able to grow a kala successfully and plant it in their backyards. If we could figure out how to do that, boy, would that be a popular plant, probably going across the world. But this is just another nasty, thorny, dense, matted kind of plant that can, like other rubus species, can invade pretty much anywhere. And it's fruit dispersed, meaning the birds will carry it wherever they go. It's currently in Mountain View, and the owner of the property where we found it remembers his grandfather had planted it. His grandfather brought it in. So we have sort of an interesting situation in that one, that we kind of know exactly where the first planting was, and I think it was the 1960s. We have a when, so that's kind of unusual. We have found a few. There's a drainage that goes through the area and goes down into the bottom of Hawaiian Acres. So we have found some plants down at the bottom of Hawaiian Acres. Those we're treating. So what we're doing is we're trying to keep it on the property where it already is and monitor all around and treat that. And we are going to try some attempts this year to hopefully try to take out that plant with some new technologies. Unfortunately, it's been really resistant to us being able to eradicate, which is what happens. We'll see. But you can see there's Murphy celebrating all the dead leaves that you see. That is previously treated Moluccan raspberry that he was able to kill. So he's pretty stoked about that. This is what it looks like when it's alive. It's just a really thick, nasty mat and we don't want that on the Big Island. So Murphy's right to be celebrating in this picture. We use a lot of different tools. So as you know, throughout this presentation, you've seen people with hatchets, you've seen people with chainsaws. And in order to do this eradication work, you know, a lot of it is just really boots on the ground, hands in the dirt. Like, we have to get rid of these species manually. So a lot of this will be with chainsaws, machetes, hatchets, all kinds of tools. And it's just a long, hot, sweaty, mosquito-filled day for crew members quite often. For those who have worked with us on trees like albizia, we use a method where we try to do the least amount of herbicide possible and inject it directly into the tree. So because we have to work with herbicides, we are very particular about how we utilize pesticides. All of our staff has PPE, and we're always trying to use the least amount possible and in the most targeted way possible, because we are concerned about safety, not only of our employees, but we're also concerned about the safety of the environment around us, right? We're trying to save the environment, not hurt it. So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing it in the most targeted way that's only going to impact that species that we're going after. So we do a lot of this kind of work. Murphy's demonstrating here. When we do spray, this is a spray where we have very heavy droplets. For those of you who have sprayed pesticides before, you'll know that they drift on the wind. If it's a windy day, you have to be really conscious and cognizant of the environmental conditions around you. And so this method that he's using, play that again, you'll see the blue splatter onto just the Moluccan raspberry. And that's really important, that we're just trying to hit just that plant and not having spray all into the other areas. So we do a lot of work to make sure that we're very careful with that. When we get into just trying to find stuff, when we're trying to eradicate it, we are getting really excited about this new technology. It's not a new technology, it's a really old technology, but we're using it in conservation fairly new to us. That would be the sniffers of a dog. We used a devil weed detector dog this past year in Puna for the first time. So this dog is actually trained to sniff out devil weed. Her name is Kana. She's from Oahu. So she came over with her trainer, Kyoko, who had to be the one to book the tickets. Kana wasn't able to do it. So we were able to use her nose to find things that our human eyes were not able to detect. When you're looking at a wall of vegetation like this, it's a lot harder for us to see a tiny little kiki of a devilweed plant, but you can see Kana's on the mish. She is going to figure it out. And we were really testing this to see if this is something that could be useful to us. So the first, we just had her here for 2 weeks, but if you look at this is our original site of detection of devilweed in Hilo. This is the motocross track, and you can see these purple lines is our staff going back and forth and back and forth. We're doing all these transects to check. You see where we are finding the plant in these pink dots, right? But then what we found was past where sort of the red area is an area where the dog found a plant that we had missed. And then you get to these other dots where the dog alerted. This big yellow line was our buffer zone. That was our area that we were going to check. We got to check all in here to make sure we don't find any more devilweed plants. And the dog alerted outside of that, meaning that maybe our buffer zone isn't quite big enough. So this is something that's informing the work that we do to say, oh, okay, maybe there's another location around we haven't found in this area, and we need to be looking over here. So the dog is really useful for us because it's really helping us do a more thorough job. So we're going to continue to work with the dog going forward, which is really exciting. And of course, Kana's a good dog. So when she finds the plant, she gets her Frisbee and she's very happy. So that's her reward. It's pretty cheap. She works for cheap. So, okay, let's move on. Other technologies we use is pretty exciting. The last few years, we've got really into using drones, particularly with our rapid ohia death program, where we're searching out dead ohia so that our team can get to the ohia and take a sample to see, was it rod that killed that ohia or was it something else? So that in new areas where rod had not necessarily been detected before, we want to know, is it gotten to that area? Is there something we can do to prevent it? So we've been using UAV. We also use UAV to find species that, previously, look at this landscape. You can imagine sending a team out to do transects, right? It's very hot, dry, long day. It's hard on the body. And it's something that maybe we could still miss. So if you're 10 meters apart and everybody's doing their transect and looking at the ground, maybe there's a plant in between that's going to be missed. Whereas with UAV, we can cover a lot more ground. And rather than having people walking on transect lines, at that point, you could, there it is. You could actually just send them, once you have the points from the UAV, you can say, oh, we know exactly where the plants are. That's where you need to go and treat those plants. And so it actually reduces the effort and the ground time that we have to spend. So we're really getting into using the UAV to maximize our ability to utilize our resources. So we love that technology. There's other things with UAV, but maybe we'll do next year, we'll do another webinar on that. But really, we do rely on the public for detection. We are about, I want to say there's under 15 employees right now at BIISC. We don't have enough people to cover the entire Big Island, 4,000 square miles of land, to be able to find everything that we need to find. So we rely on the public. And we, as I showed earlier, we try to make ourselves as available as possible using social media. So we have a BIISC Instagram account, a BIISC Facebook account. We have a website, we have email. Any way that you can reach out to us and send us a photo, do it, go for it, send it to us. It's free. We don't mind, even if it's something that we've seen 100 times, that's okay. And then we'll let you know what it is. We also participate in 643pest.org, which is a statewide program that if you, it's your see something, say something for species, for suspicious species. You can report something to 643pest.org and they will figure out what that is. It's really good number, or a really good website to remember. The phone number works, but it's a little, it's not quite as solid as the online, because you can actually upload a picture and really get a good response that way. But that's a good one to remember, 643pest.org. And for those that are really out there in the outdoors a lot and use iNaturalist, which is a great big worldwide program, we are actually reviewing things on iNaturalist for species that are of concern to us to see if other people have spotted them on the Big Island, and is that a correct identification? And if it is a correct identification, well, that's something we got to get out there and look at. And so iNaturalist is another. So we're using whatever digital communication tools that we can utilize with the public. We want to take advantage of that, and we want you to take advantage of that as well. Because anything that is weird to you that could mean something, let us know. Again, here are all those contacts. Really appreciate all the time that you guys have put into this, and all the people that reported things to us in the last year. It's just been amazing to see how willing people are to get out there and be the eyes and ears and try to help mitigate these problems on the Big Island. So I much appreciate it. I'm happy to take questions. If there's any questions, you can put them in the chat and Kavehi will relay those to me. And this webinar should be up on I don't know, maybe by Monday or early next week, we should have this recording up on our YouTube. So that's another thing. You can go to our YouTube and there's lots of informational videos available there. So please be sure to check out that resource. And I'll go back to our contact info and I'll leave it on that. Aloha. Kavehi, you want to let me know if there's any questions?
We don't have any questions yet.
Okay.
If anyone wants to mute themselves too, feel free.
I figured maybe I'd just chime in rather than typing into the chat.
Sure.
So yeah, thanks for a really informative and interesting presentation. It's all awesome work you guys are doing and great to see. A little bit tangent, well, not tangential at all, but cane toads. I've noticed they seem to be, like a few years ago, I'd see a few here and there, one or two. Now they're kind of all over the place. Is that something you guys are tracking? Is it, I didn't see them on your list of invasive species, but I'm kind of assuming they are.
Oh yeah, they're definitely considered invasive species. The list that we have on our website are generally things we work on. That does not in any way reflect a comprehensive list of all of the things that are invasive in Hawaii, which is unfortunately quite long. But they are considered invasive in Hawaii. We are not working, we don't do a lot of work with vertebrates. It's kind of rare. They seem to cycle. In my experience, it seems like cane toads cycle, like their populations go up and down. I mean, we don't have like a huge problem like in Australia where they're just everywhere. Whether that's because they're still in a lag period, and they've been here for many decades. So it feels like maybe this is the equilibrium in Hawaii. I don't know if it's related to weather cycles or exactly what, with the population, but they are pretty common, unfortunately, on the Big Island. We haven't seen huge impacts, but they are here.
Sure, cool. Yeah, I've lived in my house here for almost 20 years, and I'm seeing probably 5 times more right now than I've seen in the past. So I just wondering.
I mean, I know I've noticed, because I have some in my area, have some folks that have ranches, and when they sometimes they'll put in like ponds, like irrigation ponds, or like aquaculture ponds. Is it possible that any of your neighbors put in a pond?
I guess I'm not aware of anything, but I guess it's possible. Yeah. I understand in Australia they spray them with something that kills them. Is there any move for anything like that here?
Not that I am aware of. That would be something that would have to go through the Department of Agriculture, because anytime there's any kind of pest that you're going to apply a pesticide through, they have to approve it. And I haven't heard anything about that, but it's definitely, if you want to email me, I will check at the university to see if there's anybody who's working on cane toads, and I can get back to you if there is.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Of course. Yeah, for species that we don't directly work on, we do really try to connect folks with the people who are working on them. If there is, right? That's the thing, there's just so many species that are causing harm in Hawaii that some things are sort of just hanging there waiting for some attention. And, it's always a measurement of resources of like, is it causing enough harm that we need to invest in it? And, there's so much tension in that game that we have to play, unfortunately. In an ideal world, there'd just be plenty of resources for us to take care of the environment, but we got to build a stadium, so we can't afford it.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Thanks a lot.
Okay, well, if that's it, thank you for attending, folks. Much appreciated. And we came in under an hour, which was my hope. So have a lovely rest of your day and weekend.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.